Welcome to A Time to Thrill. This is me, your host, Amy Austin. I have been on a little bit of a hiatus while I've been traveling. It's difficult to keep recording and keep moving around in time zones and all that. This month, I am gifting you with a special encore presentation of my interview with romance author Synethia Williams. The thing that has amazed me is watching Synethia's career blossom. We started out at the same publisher, oh my God, probably 12, no, 12 years ago. I'd like it to be yesterday. And she has moved on to write these like lush and great romances, and her book out on August 15th is called The Secret to a Southern Wedding, and it has gotten rave reviews. It's been an Amazon top romance pick before it's published. So if you love romance, small town southern romance, run on out and get it. But I do want to share this interview with you again because one of the things we do talk about is I don't call it the difficulty, but some of the hurdles in romance publishing, and especially as women of color. And she has surpassed many of those hurdles to do something that I think is really special. So if you haven't heard before or you're ready to listen again, check that out. In the meantime, I'm recording this actually in Budapest. I just closed the windows because as quiet as this is, there is traffic noise. I think the street that I live on in LA is much quieter. So actually the street I live on here is quieter. My windows face a noisier side. So I live in a lovely, quiet, one-way tree-lined street with no traffic, but the way the building is oriented, the windows face a street where there's a regular, something we call a trolley bus, that comes by every 10 minutes in two different directions. While I'm here, I am putting the finishing touches on The Murders Began. It's one of the most, I don't want to say complicated books I've ever written, because I have to pull together all of the elements of the first 2.5, as it were, 3 books in the Nicole Long series. And Nicole Long is up against it. She's having a hard time. And her managing her sobriety, as it were, or her alcohol problem, as well as dealing with the machinations of someone who is ready to do her in, is no small feat. So, but you know what? You'll have it in your hands in February. I promise you that it'll all be well, good and done by then. In the meantime, going through and making sure there are no loose ends is basically a full-time job. What else? So I will be back probably in September or October. I have a lovely list of authors I can't wait to speak with, and I can't wait to share their stories and inspiration with you. Until then, enjoy this encore interview with romance author Synethia Williams. Hi, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. I'm so excited. This month, I am featuring romance author Synethia Williams. Hi.
Hello.
It's so good to have you. Thank you so much for doing this. I have followed your career since we started together. Oh my God, like probably 10 years ago.
I know, at Crimson. Oh my God, it was like forever ago.
It was. But we share that background. Yay.
Yes.
But you've kept writing romance. Actually, I think I just stopped writing romance 3 or 4 years ago, and I only write legal thrillers now, but that's not before I wrote a whole bunch of them. So I, sometimes I say this podcast should be called I Have So Many Questions, because I'm really
intensely curious about people, which is why probably I write books. But the curiosity spreads outside of that, and I have
I get that. I get that.
um,
Yeah.
so I every person like I've encountered over the last I don't know how many years, I'm like, I have so many questions about how their life goes, but you can't ask that. So then you have a podcast, and you can. So um,
Very smart of you. Very, very smart.
so I want to thank you so much for doing this. So to give, I guess, listeners a little background. So, well, at least for me, my my knowing you has to do with being published by Crimson. It was the first publisher that published for me two romances in 2012 and 2013. I want to say. I believe I signed the contracts in 2011, but I believe they came out in 2012 and 2013. And so, how were those your first books?
They were. And it was 2012, which is, gosh, 10 years ago.
It is
That went by
so
so freaking
fast.
fast. I know, but yeah, it was those were my first books with first romances that were published ever was with Crimson. I had made the decision about 2010 to seriously, and I'm making air quotes with my fingers, to
Mhm,
seriously write.
mhm.
I'm not just going to scribble on these books here and there and then one day dream of being a published author. And
Right.
so 2010 is just when I say, yeah, let's do this for real. And so I finished a book that I had been working on for years. I don't even know how long, and put it out there. I did not, at the time, I did not think I wrote stories that traditional publishing would be interested in, but I also did not think I had the time or energy to go independent. And so
Mhm.
I thought, oh, these digital first book prints, these publishers is who I need to go with. So it's kind of like I'm not worried about breaking the traditional, what were they, the Big 5 or Big 6 or whatever they were back
It may have
then.
been more than 6 back then, but
I
yes.
know it may have been more back then. I was like, I don't have to worry about trying to break into New York like an actress breaking into Hollywood. I don't
Right.
need to worry about doing it all on my own. I can go this route. And so I particularly look at publishers that were like Crimson, and that was around the time a lot of these digital imprints were coming up.
That's
And
true.
I had a couple of offers, but I really was excited about what Crimson was doing at that time because
Mhm.
they seemed to be really excited about romance and wanting to put books out frequently. And even the editors I had then, I still follow some of them online now because they were so helpful with kind of developing my earlier writing style. So,
Okay.
yep, those are my first books that they did.
So wait, when was You Can't is it You Can't Buy Me Love? No, what was it? I remember
Yeah,
the
You Can't
cover.
Play Love. Yeah, that was the first one,
Oh,
and that was the 2012 book. That was the very first one,
oh,
August of 2012. Like, I
okay.
just celebrated 10 years published,
Wow, okay.
that last August.
I remember the covers so well. I remember so many of those covers very, very well. I don't
I
know
know.
why, but I do. I will never like they're imprinted in my head. So I mean, I know you've changed covers and all that, but those ones are still I can see it in my head. Those are still there. So did you end up publishing 3 with Crimson? That's my best memory, but I could be wrong.
I actually ended up doing 7 with them. I did,
Oh, maybe I tuned out after 3. I mean, not you, but I just may have tuned out in life.
I know. With everything. It was so much going on. So it was the first 3 I did, You Can't Plan Love, Worth the Wait, and Heart to Heal.
Mhm.
And then
Oh,
I
Worth the
was
Wait. I
shopping.
remember that. Sorry.
Yep, yep. I was shopping around, what later was Just My Type. I don't know what it was originally titled when I was shopping it around. And I had an agent at the time who I am no longer working with. I don't think she was really jiving with my writing style or whatnot. And so it was after me and that agent kind of split, I think I went back and offered Just My Type to Crimson. And then I did that 4 book series with them as well. So it was 7 books total.
Wow. Okay. So I have a lot of
Yeah.
questions, but we need to go back. So I ask this of everyone because actually I'm going to say this. People's stories have turned out to be very similar. But how did you start reading or consuming romance?
Very cliches of the 13-year-old. I've been reading romance since I was a teenager. That you
Mhm.
hear a lot of romance authors
Uh,
say. I did the go into the library. I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. Been in the South, been in South Carolina my whole life. And our library was where I would go, and they would have like romances in the little turning turnstile and
I
whatnot.
remember the
And
little
so,
the
yep,
spinny
the little
card.
turnstile
Yeah.
spinny cart thing, yeah. And I would get some from the library, and then I realized, oh, they have this neat little card in the middle where if I fill stuff out, I get mail. And like at 12 and 13, of course you
Oh.
want mail to come to you to your house. And so I filled out the little card, and I probably never paid my fees, but they sent me my first free books, and that's just kind of how it started at the library, and then filling out that little card and those Harlequin books to start getting some free books. And also growing up in a small town, we had a flea market, but we didn't call it a flea market. This is really country. We called it the jockey lot. And so
Oh
you
my
would
god, I've never
go
heard
to
that
the
before. Sorry.
I know, I don't know anybody else who says that. I've even asked other country folks and they don't know it. So it might have just
Wow.
been specific to our area. But we go to the flea market or the jockey lot, and they had this guy there who just had books, and you could get as many books as you wanted for like $5 in a bag. And I just remember my parents would let me just come home with this huge bag full of books, and it was mostly pre-owned books or whatnot.
Mhm.
And I would kind of go home, read the back, and I immediately sort it to yes, I'm going to read this. Maybe after I'm done with the yes stack, and no, I'm never going to read these because I didn't read them at the flea market. I
Right.
just shoved them all into the bag.
Oh, so wait. Okay, I have to ask you, what was your criteria for the bag shoving? Because it
Mostly
had to
just the cover.
cover, it had to be cover.
It had to be the cover, because at the flea market, it wasn't really the category. So that's when I really started reading historicals. So it was like the
Okay.
historicals, and then if there was a historical that looked or a cover that looked not historical, like there would be some of those futuristic kind of
Mhm.
thick romances from the Zebra imprint and
Mhm.
stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that looks weird. Shove it in the bag.
Mhm.
Oh, look, that looks like, somebody on a horse, shove that in the bag. I did not want to read like Southern Confederate kind of historicals because I mean, grew up in the
No,
South and
I don't read those. But yes.
yeah. So I was just like, I wouldn't put those aside. I didn't really read a lot of westerns. Um, I didn't want those. I shoved those to the side. So it was mostly a lot of futuristic or the Regency England kind of stuff is what I was shoving to the bag and then separate when I got home.
Wow. Okay. So okay. So did the library then have the category, and then the flea market have the I want to say everything else?
Yeah, pretty much. The library had the category, and then once I discovered I can get tons more books for like just a few bucks at the
Mhm.
flea market, I was mostly let's go to the flea market every weekend. It
Oh.
was a joy.
Okay. So you don't have, so it wasn't your mother, grandmother, aunt, older sister. So you don't have that particular. So then what was it, do you think, about the romances in the little spinny carousel that caught your attention?
I think it's just because I've always been like that girl who loves love. I remember in kindergarten, having a quote unquote, Synethia and the little boy that she likes, and like we're having a fantasy wedding at indoor recess when it rained. And I watched soap operas with my grandmother when they babysat me and being like, oh, I want to love like Bo and Hope, or, like I was always that person who enjoyed romance and happy stories. And so when you read a romance, you get that happy story. It's going you may go through stuff,
Mhm.
but we all know at the end you should get a happy ending
That's
or
true.
happy now, and you happy sigh and you close the book and you're like, "Oh, the world is a little less bleak today because that book brought me so much joy." And I think that's what it was. I was just enjoying the romance of it. And I will admit, as a preteen or whatnot, I did enjoy the ones that did have like good love scenes too.
we
So
we did, and they amped up about the time I hit puberty, which was, I think,
right.
convenient, given my age. So, oh, I just okay. So what? Okay, after, let's say, now that you could look back, what were the tropes or themes that caught you the most?
Let's see. I think it's probably some of the tropes that still catch me.
Well,
If
that's
there
true.
was a love triangle of some sort,
Mhm.
you're with duty says you should be over here with this perfect person, but then the rake comes along and he's who you really want to be with, then
Right.
you have to do that. I always liked brother's best friend kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I've always loved you from afar, and you're finally noticing me today.
Yes.
And we can be happy together. I like those. And yeah, I like the alpha a-holes. I was really big on that coming up. And
Ah.
even to a certain extent now, I notice that when I watch some K dramas and I'm like, oh, he's a jerk. You should definitely be with him. So
I I watch those as well, so I know how that goes. The more
yeah,
buttoned up, the
yeah.
better, but that's a whole conversation. So what? So then, because to me this seems like a big leap. Okay, so romance is this like $4 billion industry. Clearly, lots and lots and lots of people read them, but obviously a much smaller percentage write them. So what gave you the, I don't know, the confidence, the wherewithal? What was it in you that said I should write these?
I've always been a writer too. I have somewhere in this messy office a book I wrote, well, a story I wrote in like fifth grade. I remember writing a story in first or second grade, and I made the cover out of wallpaper. I've always been a scribbler of stories and making stuff up. And in high school, I was handwriting a romance novel.
Oh my gosh.
And I still have those. I wrote two books in high school. They're 300 pages, written single space notebook paper. I still have those books that I wrote.
Wow.
But what got me in high school is that I'm just sitting there writing my story, and then somebody's finally like, "So what you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm writing a book." And like, "Let me read it." I'm like, "Sure, whatever." And then it got to the point where I would finish writing a page because we're
Mhm.
not doing math, we're just teaching, but whatever. Sneaky writing, and
Mhm.
I'd finish a page, and somebody next to me would be like, "Give me that page," and then they read it as soon as I finish the page.
Wow.
Um, and I think that was probably maybe the first time I thought, "Oh, well, maybe I'll be a writer one day." But,
Mhm.
you go to college, you get married, you have kids, you get jobs,
Mhm.
and so the romance writer dream goes on the back burner. But even when the dream went on the back burner, it never went away. I was still scribbling stories and having ideas, and I'll write a chapter or start a book and then just save it and go on and do life again.
Right. But what coalesced in 20 whatever, let's say, the 2010, 11, 12 years?
It was it was a friend, well, a coworker. We were at lunch that day, and me and her worked very closely together on projects at work. And so I really enjoyed working with her. And then she said, "Oh, I put in my resignation today. I'm moving to somewhere and I'm going to law school." And I was just floored. Like, what?
Mhm.
We don't do law. Like we do environmental stuff. Why are you going to law school? And she was said that she was talking to a guy who was doing environmental law, and she said, "That's so cool. I really wish I could do that." And he looked at her and said, "You can do it. Why not?" And so she thought, that is true. Why not? And
Mhm.
so she moved her whole family. She's going to law school because the guy said, "Why not?" And her conversation struck me because even though I don't want to go to law school, not seriously,
Mhm.
but I wanted to write. And it just kind of hit me like, well, I don't want to go to law school right now, but I do want to be a writer and I need to quit talking about it and let me just do it. And so I always credit to that going to lunch with Megan that day and her saying, "Yeah, I'm going to law school." So, you know,
Mhm.
and I was like, "You know what?" I think I came home and told my husband the story, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to finish that book that I've been working on, and I'm going to actually try to get it published." And he said, "Cool, do it."
Mhm.
And so I did. I researched publishing. I had always seen Romance Writers of America in all those books I had been reading for years. So I
That's
said,
true. Yeah.
let's figure out what this is. Let's go find those people and let's join. And oh, I'm like one of those planners. If I'm gonna be a writer, I should join writer groups.
Right.
And so I found writer groups, and it was like I should get Writer's Digest magazine because that's a magazine about writing. I'm that person.
Mhm.
So all the stuff that I could find and start uh, consuming to learn more about how to write, how to publish. That's what I started doing. And that's how I ended up making the decision of indie versus traditional versus digital imprints and how I wanted to write. And let me find books. Let me find books about how do you write romance novels and
Mhm.
how do you write novels and all that. So, oh, I need to be on social media. Let me get books on that. I read Twitter for Dummies. Like, let me figure out how to do this thing called Twitter that just came out. So that was me. I just took a very, like, I take a lot of stuff, took a very methodical, if I want to do this, let me learn what I need to do in order to make it happen.
Okay. That is so amazing because it's that kind of spark. I have that kind of spark. I was just thinking about this guy named Chris. He divorced somebody I knew, but one day we were talking about. I was like, he was just studying. I don't know where it was, a coffee shop, and I ran into him. I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm studying yoga teacher training." I'm like, "I've always wanted to do that." And he's like, "So why don't you do it?" And I was like, "Huh?"
Right?
I was like, "Wait, what?" But
Like, yeah,
sometimes people
yeah,
just clear the way for you. They're like, "Why not?" And you're thinking, I literally didn't have a good excuse. I think I went and signed up the next day. Like I just
yep.
literally, 'cause when he said it, I was like, well, that's a good question. I'm going to get this coffee and run away. You know what I mean? But
That's exactly how I felt like. Yeah, if I really want to do this, why can't I? All right, let's do it.
yeah. So what, oh, let me say this. So when you did the Crimson and you said you stayed for 7 books, what year was the last one you did with them? I don't.
Oh, geez, I can't even remember. It was probably um 2014, 2015-ish.
um,
I think my last book with Crimson came out at the same time I was writing. I think I was working on my last Crimson books when I started working on my first Kamanis. So that was probably about 2014, 2015 when the
Oh,
last one came out.
okay. So I have to ask you this because I have so many questions about this. How did you come to write for Kumani? So let me say this. I have a lot of feelings. So maybe I should get that out. So when I was like, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, I don't know. I think I was in middle school. My mother said she came home. So I used to read romances by the bucket. I'd be at the used bookstore. I'd be at the library. I'd be at,
Mhm,
they call them tag sales where I live, the garage sales. And so I would go to these tag sales and I would, come home with a bag of books for a couple of bucks or whatever. So my mother comes into my room and she was like, there are no black people in any of these books. And I was like, that is 100% true, but this is what's
mhm,
available. And so she brought me a Kamani book, but Kamani was an independent publisher before they were purchased by
mhm,
Harlequin. So I read them at that time. And then who knows what happened. But I will say this about Kwani. One of the issues I had with it is that that was the category line for like black romances for Harlequin.
mhm,
But what I'm a trope reader, so what I always found difficult because my mother or other people would say, "Well, why don't you read them?" And I picked them up because I felt so guilty that I wasn't reading books
I
about
get
black
that.
people
Yeah.
written by black people. Oh my god, the guilt! So I picked them up, but the issue I had is that I liked I'm gonna be like I'm very specific. I have two like Harlequin lines I would read, like Blaze or whatever. And
Mhm.
I had a very specific thing. I wanted like these 4 tropes, like friends to lovers, like, captured, whatever.
Yes.
Whatever. And I was very specific and I needed a certain level of heat. And the issue that I'd had with Kamani is that when I opened the book, I didn't know what I was going to get. And a lot of time they were like billionaires. I don't do billionaires. And so
Yeah.
and I was like, but this is not what I want. So it was and the heat levels were hit or miss. Sometimes the religious themes were
Mhm.
hit or miss. And I was like, this is like all over the place. Okay, so these are all my feelings. Now I'm done talking about my feelings. So but this is later. So I'm going to be honest. I think that I don't know. I read a lot, but I haven't read a Connie book in a long time. So what was the shift? Okay, so how did you decide to write for them? Because
Everything you're
Harlequin,
saying,
yeah.
I felt it. I didn't read Kamanis, which, they say read what you're going to try to write for. I didn't read Kamanis. As a matter of fact, I never looked at Harlequin when I first started.
Mhm.
I didn't think they were going to take me seriously, because my Crimson books were a higher heat level and they messy. Like I write messy stories sometimes,
Mhm.
and they're not perfect characters. And I think at the time, the Kamani requirements were even like I don't even remember the wording, but it was basically these have to be super perfect, awesome black people that can never make mistakes. There's no
Yeah.
babies out of wedlock. It's like
Mhm.
none of that stuff that I would throw like
Mhm.
in my books you can do in a Kamani. And they had actually, because the agent I had previously, or maybe I did, I don't remember, 10 years ago, stuff blurs, but they had rejected one of my books
Hmm.
that I think I sent just as it was sent as a one off, not like a yeah, let's see, but they don't want my stories.
Right.
And there was a contest one day that Kamani was holding, like a writer for Kamani, and pitched something. And I was like, Kamani doesn't want my stories, but let me pitch this ridiculous wild idea that I got, because I was deep in the throes of Idris Elba fandom.
Okay.
And I was like, what if you won a date with Idris Elba in New York City and fell in love? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Mhm.
And so I just
Mhm.
kind of like wrote that up and sent it in like, watch they take this. Like, this is not my serious story. This is just Sanithia thinking that this is something super fantasy that, you know,
Mhm.
they may go for. But and they took it, and I was like, "Oh, for real?" Was just kind of playing around because I didn't think, and because there wasn't a lot of places for Black romance writers to go
Mhm.
then. You had Kamani, and then you have Kensington's Defina line, and
Right.
those were like only two black folks only.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing you say. It's like the whole mixed bag. You just throw it in there. You got a Prince book, you got a sports person, you got a billionaire. Let's just throw them all together. We don't care. It's just because they're black.
I
And
know, and you're like, this is not well for me. This is
right,
but I don't want that. I want this, but that's my
right. And there may be one in that batch that came out that month, and then you don't see it again for 2 more months before the next one comes out. So there were very specific Kamani authors that I read. I did
Mhm.
not read everybody who wrote for Kamani, but there were specific people who I knew I liked their stories, and I liked their writing style, and so those were the only Kamani authors I really read. So I didn't just read everybody
Mhm.
across Kamani.
Right.
And they took the story, which surprised me,
Mhm.
and then they said, "We also want you to write 3 more books for us." And I was at the time I had broken up with my agent. I really didn't have any kind of other plans on the horizon, and I was like, "Sure, I can expand the story. He's got 2 friends. I can write
Mhm.
series are born from the main characters having friends."
Mhm.
And I wrote his 2 friends, and then the third friend, because he was a basketball player, they offered a 4 more book deal. And this is the thing with Kamani, which I realized now looking back.
Mhm.
They were notorious for being like, take this 4 book contract. And we're gonna get you on the long haul for 4 books, every 6 months. They were good at that, of being like, here's 3 book contract, here's a 4 book contract. And I think that's how they just kind of kept things going. But
Okay.
when they offered the 4 books, I was already the third person in the first 3 books. I was like, oh well, he's a basketball star, so I can just write out the rest of these. I was very lucky that Kamani really didn't try to um hamper my writing style much. Now, I do have some readers who, when they read my indie books and they read my Crimsons, when they got to my Kamanis, and it was toned down a little bit more, they were kind of like, "This isn't what we wanted, Snethia." But like, we still like your writing, but we didn't, it's not as out there
Right.
as some of your other stuff. Which I got that, but I knew that was part of writing for the
Harlequin.
Kamani line,
Yeah.
and yeah, for Harlequin. Um, they even in one of the books, which is the one that people really like, Garden His Heart. It was one of the sports ones. When I turned in the proposal, he's got 4 kids by 2 baby mamas, right?
Mhm.
And Kamani, the editor, was like, "I don't like this. Can you take this away?" And I'm like, "Nope. It's already been established 2 books ago that this dude got 4 kids, 2 baby mamas. So y'all gotta publish it." So that was like the end of that argument, and that's probably the only hard stance I really had to take. I'm like, I'll tone back some of the language, and I'll still make it spicy, but not too spicy. So I felt like I was still able to write the kind of the story that I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, but I just knew that because I was writing for that line, it may not be as messy as the stuff I had written previously.
So can I ask you this? So how many books did you end up writing for Kamane?
3, 7
Okay.
for them as well. Yeah.
And so were you with them? How can I say this? Were you with them when they closed the line, or were you at that? And
Yes.
okay, so had they
Yeah.
gone to this is I may be conflating this with another line because obviously I know a lot of authors, but for your line, did they go to only before they closed and then stop doing, or no?
No, they did print, and then actually my last Kamani book came out as a double printing. So they put my book with somebody else's book. I'm looking around my room. I don't easily see it.
Hmm.
But that's what they did for like that last line of us
Okay.
who were coming out for that last year. They did just do like a 2 for 1, and they put two books together
Okay.
and they put them out, which again was infamous for Kamani because it's like I don't know if they always said these two authors write the same kind of story. Let's just put their books together.
Hmm.
It's still these authors' books were coming out at this time. We're gonna put them together
Right.
and kind of put it out there. Yeah.
I remember. Well, I remember all of that. So what?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess okay. I have two questions, but let me start with the first. When you were writing for Kamani, what was it like writing for Harlequin? Because most people I know who wrote for Harlequin started there, so the strictures and structure that they had was the thing that they had coming out of the gate. But you had been published, obviously, 7 books before you got to Harlequin. So how was it change? How was the editorial? How did you manage their particular? Because okay, let me say this: Harlequin is known for being fairly strict with either word count or trope or kind of character or the baby mama. Like all of these things are known for being fairly strict about what characters can have, do, be. And but if you started there, it was you started there. But you starting somewhere else, the how was it different? How did you navigate
That
that?
shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is I'm really good about playing by the rules. I'm that
Okay.
person. If the teacher says we have to read this and do this thing by the end of the day, I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
So I'm I'm one of those people. And so when I did the one off, yeah, this is a Idris Elba fan fiction story, and they took it and then offered, I knew, okay, if I'm going to accept this deal, then I have to play in the sandbox
Right.
now. So I knew I had to prepare myself for playing in that sandbox. I was very fortunate, or maybe I don't know. I was very fortunate in that the editors I had, the comments they gave back weren't comments that made me want to bang my head against the wall. Like
Okay.
the closest one was when they were like, I don't like this. Can he not have these baby mamas? And I'm
Right.
like, no, it's too late. But the other stuff, if I put a curse word in, or if
Mhm.
I called, if I didn't use shaft but used, I don't know how much cursing you allow, but if I
Any.
said dick
Yeah.
versus shaft or something, they're like, no, you can't use dick. Then I played this game of let's sneak dick in my books. And so it's like, see if they can find it. And the ones they found, okay, I changed it. And the ones they didn't find, I just leave.
Uh,
So I would play that kind of little, I would play that game. Of what can I sneak in the book? But the like curse word problem, I didn't have a problem if I had to tone down the cursing. And the word count restriction for me, we talked about it a little bit before we got on about how I work full time.
mhm.
Having the word count restriction as a full time worker and writer is kind of good because I need deadlines, I need structure.
Right.
Because if I'm working during the day, my writing time is very focused and structured to make sure I get it done. And so it actually felt easier because my other books were 75, 80, 90,000
Mhm.
words. And then my Kamani is like, oh, all you need is 50? Yeah, I got you. So it's just like I could sit down and focus, and I can get this 50-word novel out. I also, with both of the series they took, there were stories that I had pitched. I
Mhm.
wasn't a Harlequin author, and I'm still not a Harlequin author who's gotten we want you to write the story, and we're going to give you the outline, and you fit it.
Yes, it comes with the
Everything.
heavy Bible. It used to be paper. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is now, but yes, yes.
Right, right. I never got that offer. And so I was able to write the stories within the world that I created, and I can still make them the characters I wanted them to create. Um, I actually remember another comment. I think in the last book, the best friend was the one who betrayed the heroine, because she it was a brother's best friend story, and the best friend did not want her with her brother,
Mhm.
because she thought, if you're now my brother's girlfriend, or then you can't be a full best friend to me, because now my secrets are automatically his secrets, because there's
Right.
no secrets between people in relationships.
Right.
And I did have an editor who said, I don't know if I like the friend is saying this. Would you consider it? And I said, no, this is based off of a real conversation I had with some colleagues. So this is real people's feelings.
Mhm.
And they backed off. They left it alone,
Wow.
and they
Okay.
let me keep that in there. So that's probably the only other one
So
that's
maybe
commented.
you're bolder because I know people who were upset, but I don't think anybody I know actually pushed back. So
Oh,
I mean, we're adults, so basically, we're talking about how we're upset. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
then they go write the book. You know what I mean? Like, because as adults, you got to sometimes keep all your feelings. You got to deal with that conversation
Yeah.
with your friends before you go back and not act like you're crazy. So I So I realized maybe they never pushed back. I'm gonna have to ask about that because I have a number of friends who wrote for Harlequin and had those complaints, but I don't think they felt that they had the agency to push back. And this is like 20, 25 books. So
Mm.
that's interesting. Okay, that's just an interesting thing I'll keep in my head. So one thing when I was looking, okay, I have not read all of your books. I have read like two Crimson books.
I mean, there's like 25 of them. I don't expect everyone to have read all of them.
Trust me, I get it. So what? Let me see this. Okay, so let me. How can I say this? So every time I see that you have like a new book, I'm all like full of pride because I was like, oh my god, she's writing for HQN and she's like a black woman writing for HQN and thank goodness and whatever. So, but that's me back in the corner. But what? How did you end up making the leap to HQN? Because you're the well, no, there's another Naima. I wrote some books for just wrote a book. Oh, I don't know. I'm losing track of time. But how did you
Yeah.
make that leap to that single title imprint, as it were?
That I still am surprised that they took that book. So I had a new agent by then. I was pitching the story. My commodities were done.
Mhm,
The line was closed, and I was in that moment of, oh, woe is me. What shall my writing career now become?
mhm,
Kind of thing. And it was DV Pit, Diverse Pit, or one of those Twitter pitches. And I put out there, and I think the hook was something about a violinist comes home and is swept in her brother's political campaign and realizes she's still in love with her sister's ex-husband, or something like that
okay.
is how I pitched
Wow.
it. And and I was like, because I had this book idea and I was talking to my writer friends and I was like, I want to write this soapy, messy, I grew up on Young and the Restless and God and Light and all that. I want to write that, but with black people.
Mhm.
And they were like, do it. And I was like, yeah. And so I'm pitching it. And then these publishers are like, oh, no, that's too messy. We don't want that. Or we can't connect to the characters, or, all the
Mhm.
jazz they tell
Right.
you. And so I wasn't, I didn't think anybody was going to write it. I didn't think anybody was going to publish it, because it has such a potentially taboo topic of, sister's ex-husband. And I
Right.
had read another story. I forgot the author's name. And I read her book on purpose because it was by a larger publisher, and it was the sister's ex-husband trope.
Mhm.
And I read the story, so I'm like, I know it's been done, and I know people will do it, and I know y'all let a white girl publish it, so somebody might take mine, but it may be a little bit harder for me
Mhm.
because they're black.
Mhm.
But HQN liked it, and Michelle, my editor, she really liked it.
Mhm.
She came back and she was like, "We want to do this story. We want to do this whole series, and we love your voice, and we think you're very similar to like Miss Jackson, and we want to have you as part of HQN." And I was just kind of like, seriously, me in this book?
Mhm.
Oh, you do realize it's messy and it's soapy, right?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Yes, let's do this then. And that's kind of how it happened. So it got rejected by some other places, but I again, like, the fact that I write for Harlequin right now is a dream of 13-year-old Snethia getting those Harlequin books
Right.
from the library.
Mhm.
But in 2010, Snethia, never would have imagined that I would be writing for Harlequin because I did not think I wrote stories that would fit the Harlequin brand.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess obviously I do because they've published my Kamanis, they've published me HQN. I've switched over to special edition. I have some more HQNs coming out next year. So it's just kind of like, you know what, Snethia, maybe they will write stories that they will publish the
There have been enough that I think you can be safe on that. So, can I? What is it like writing for special edition? So, I have read. So we were talking about how you follow authors. There are authors I have followed who have written for different different Harlequin lines, and so the only special editions I've read are by authors I follow. And you're like, oh, they're writing this, I'll read this. And what I had enjoyed about those books is that they were longer and they had more angst. But that's me. I like angst in romance. Like the angstier, the better.
Me too.
Um,
Yes.
you know, I read one romance where the conflict was like they lived 35 miles apart, and I was like, "That's not no, no, no. That's not
That's not
enough.
conflict.
That's not conflict.
Yeah.
Y'all can move halfway in between, and we could just cut this." So I
Did you have
was,
to go through the Hunger Games to get to him in those 35
I know
miles? Like, I need something.
exactly. I was like, you live in Cincinnati. He lives outside Cincinnati. I feel like there's not a lot of traffic around there. I feel like you could manage it. You could live in Kentucky. I could find you a house. So so that to me is not conflict, but I like a lot of angst or where they have the same wound, but it's like a different sort of thing. And so, how have you liked writing for a special edition? Because it seems like it may be, I don't want to say more up your alley, because that's not really fair, but it's a line that allows for a little bit more word count and angst.
Yeah, so and it's I swear my career is a fluke, but it's probably not, and I probably should stop saying that, but I felt like it was the same way that I ended up with special edition as a fluke. Um, but no, it's not a fluke, Sneaky. Stop saying that because they like it. But I was, the story idea I was pitching around because um I was still writing the HQNs, and HQN didn't want like my ghost investigating story,
Mhm.
which is fine. I get it because I knew, again, almost like with the sister's best friend, I knew this is kind of a different idea.
Right.
I don't know if everybody gonna want this idea of these three dudes that investigate ghosts, and
Right.
it's a romance, but it's not quite paranormal. Like, I want to write paranormal one day, so let's like dip my toe in it kind of lightly,
Hmm.
but I didn't know if I was going to want it. And I went through the same thing of pitching, and my agent sending it around, and some people being like, no, no, thank you. This is not what we're like. We can't connect, all that jazz that they tell you.
Hmm.
And I had one publisher who wanted it, but what they wanted me to do was turn it into a romantic comedy, and they wanted me to redo the whole beginning. And I had just come out of writing two books for Kensington Defina under a pseudonym because they insisted that I publish women's fiction under a different name.
Hmm.
And I that was a I did not want it. I I did it as a, hey, let's see how this works, but I didn't enjoy the process. I love those books. Those
Hmm.
two books I wrote as Nita Brooks, I love them.
Hmm.
And I happily tell people to read my Nita Brooks book, but the process of going through that I did not enjoy. And so when they came back and wanted me to change my whole ghost investigating stories, I was like, I just came out of this other situation. Either
No.
take the book as it is or move on.
Hmm.
Um, and then special edition came back. My editor there, she was like, I love this story. I think it's great. I don't want to change it. And it just needs to be 60,000 words. And
Right.
I think my draft was only like 66. And I was like, oh, that's easy. I can cut 6,000. Um, and I was like, as long as they're good with the story as it is, they don't want me to change it. They like it, and they're cool. And I think I needed that after the Kensington experience and after the other publisher wanted me to change it
Hmm.
because I think I could be funny, but I'm not a romantic comedy writer.
I think that's the
I may have.
hardest job. I mean, I know people who do, and I
Yeah.
don't, ugh, whatever. I don't understand how they do it, but okay.
I
And
don't want to claim that. Yeah, I may be funny. You may chuckle as you read my books, and you may laugh out loud at some things, but I'm not a romantic comedy writer.
mhm.
That's not my aim. And that's how I ended up with special edition, and I think that's why I've enjoyed writing for them because it's been the same thing. They haven't um wanted me to change my story. It's a little bit of some of the okay, sneak in the word dick if that gets your attention. It's still been some of that, and you know, that's pretty much been it, sneaking that word and maybe not so much cursing, which I was able to say all that in the HQNs, the single title books. So it was just a reset for that, but the process has been great because they've just let me write the story that I envisioned.
Oh, okay. So I did not know about your little women's fiction side journey. So wait, you wrote two women's fiction. I love women's fiction. It's like I don't read it as much because it's the same issue with Kamani. It can be hit or miss. So there's Adirondack chairs on the front, but you don't know what you're going to get on the inside.
Mhm.
So it can be totally hit or miss. But it's really like, I think at its heart, like my absolute favorite genre, because I love like a long, messy story where women have sometimes a romance, but also a lot of other stuff going on. So how did you take this little side trip to women's fiction land?
I was pitching a romance, and it was almost like a spin-off of, so I had my last book in that I wrote for Crimson,
Mhm.
From One Night to Forever, and I really wanted to explore that world I had kind of touched on. And so I had a loosely adjacent story that I was pitching. And when Kensington saw it, they were like, "We want it." But then they said, "But we want to make it women's fiction instead of romance." And I've so far in my career, and I think a little bit less now that I've been in it 10 years, I was still in the okay, I'm willing to give something a try phase of
Okay.
my career. Like, you don't want to make it women's fiction? All right, cool. I knew Kensington was doing that.
Hmm.
I had seen them do that with some other authors.
Hmm.
Say, we want to make this women's fiction or we want to do this, whatever. What threw me was after we went through all that, it was we want you to do it as a pseudonym. I don't care because that's cool. I get it. Romance is one thing, women's fiction is something else. So readers, blah blah blah. I'm
Hmm.
cool with that. But it wasn't until we were really into it that my editor was then like, no one must know that Nita Brooks is Cynthia Williams. She is a debut author. No connection to
Yeah, the whole
what's
debut
up.
author thing. This thing, and other people I've done like five different times. They've been a debut author.
Yes,
Sometimes you read books and they're like debut author. You're like my foot because their writing is so amazing, and you're like, this looks like they have a whole career behind them that we don't know about. But anyway,
it was very weird and frustrating. And so
you're
Nita
not the
Brooks,
only one. But yeah, I know.
yeah, who did it, and, like, I'm on panels at a Georgia book event with Jasmine Gilroy, and I'm acting like the newbie, and she's the long-standing author, and I'm like, "No shade, but I've written more books than her," but I can't say that, like, I have to sit here like, "Yes, I'm the new girl," So
Yeah.
I didn't, that whole experience of being Nita, I didn't enjoy, but I did enjoy the books, and I appreciate the readers who read those. And I did a book club with a reader group who read The Essence of Perfection, and they talked about how the struggles of Nicola and her sister really touched them and made them reevaluate things in their lives and made them cry. And I'm like, oh my God, I was in such a bad place with that publisher when I wrote that book, but thank you.
Mhm. So, okay. So I have two big questions, but I guess the first one. Okay, I'll save the bigger question for later. So when did you come out of the closet as both this as Nina Brooks and Zenithia Williams?
My editor left, and when I got a new editor, I said, "Hey," and I didn't, and I only had two books, a two-book contract with
Mm.
them to write as Nita, and so it was like, well, my previous editor said that you all didn't want me to do this, but now these books are out and she's gone. Do y'all care? And the answer was like, oh no, we don't care. Go ahead and do that. You can put your books together. And I'm like, was this the publisher or was this the editor? I
I
don't
know.
know. I'll never have the answer to that question. But yeah, so after that, then I was like, peekaboo, hey, I mean, it was ridiculous. RWA 2020, I'm like running around in a wig. I'm Nita Brooks at this thing. I'm Sunitha at something else. Like, I'm at the Kensington party. My editor's introducing me to people who know me. This is Nita
Oh
Brooks. And they're
God,
like,
yeah.
oh, we know who she is. It
Oh
was like
yeah.
such a big old mess. It was hilarious.
Oh my god, that's I okay. That's a whole oh my
That's a whole nother story.
that could be that would be a lovely comedy. But I don't write comedy. I feel like I want to call like Pippa Grant and like Deanna right now and ask them to write it. Okay, so the other question I have is about women's fiction. So when I was coming up, a lot of authors wrote for Harlequin category lines, and their goal or their ultimate whatever plan was to write women's fiction, whether for whatever the predecessor I can't remember what it's called right now, or something similar, or something New York, some New York women's fiction, and a lot of them made that transition. I don't want to say willingly, but that was the goal. So for you, that was not the goal.
No, it wasn't, and it's still not. I I would revisit Nita. I have people who ask me would I ever go back and write more stuff, and if I ever wrote women's fiction again, I would probably still do it under that name,
Mhm.
unless but my goal, I'm just now starting to think really beyond romance. I want to write paranormal romance. I really want to write like people boning in space or something, a space I still like romance and I enjoy it. And I do feel like because a lot of authors I started with have quote unquote grown up to other things. They're
Yeah, and I
writing
don't want to
historical
do it say
fiction
it
and
that way, but that's sort of at least okay. In the
that's what they've
70s and
done.
80s,
Yeah.
that's how it was characterized. It's like you have now been shepherded through this tunnel and look at what you can do now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I see that and I'm very, very happy for them that they have grown into these other genres and they're doing great in those areas. And um for me right now, and I still work full time,
Right.
I'm happy writing romance. I'm good being a romance writer. It would be great, yeah, maybe to try something one day, but my goal isn't to grow into a historical fiction author or
Right.
to grow into a women's fiction author
Mhm.
or anything like that. That just
Happened along
if
the
it does, it
way.
will. Yeah, if it happens, it'll be because this fluke of my career put me there. But as of September 2022, it was not because Sunithia planned to turn her
Mhm.
career into that.
All right. Okay, so the other thing I did want to talk to you about was working full time. So
Mhm.
I don't know. And I said this to you before the recording. I don't know any other authors that work full time. Of course, somebody's going to call me and be like, "What about me?" And I'll be like, "I forgot." So because I could see that, but I really don't. So, what has it been like working full time and then also managing like an entire other career? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's not as if your side hustle is like working 2 hours on a Sunday in Walmart where you can just leave it alone when you leave. So
Right.
it's one career and then a second whole career.
I so before I've switched jobs this year
Mhm,
and it's like a whole different shift. So before, writing was my brain cleanser from the day job. Like my day job it can be very technical. It's like engineer people, it's like policies and plans, and it's like all this like serious stuff.
mhm.
Um and I enjoy it. I enjoyed my day job and what I did. And I'm also vested. Like I started young enough that I can retire at 50. Like
Oh,
I'm
the thing
now
we were
in
just
the
talking
spot.
about. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, the light is at the end of this tunnel.
Right.
I see it. Um And so I was able to balance it by I would write on my lunch break or I would sketch out scenes, if I had a break at work and I would write at 9 o'clock at night, and get 1,000 words a day and all that kind of jazz. And my vacations were book fun, book events and book things.
Okay.
And it would help kind of replenish that well.
Mhm.
And I would still do like girls trip and family trips and all that, but I was able to balance them both. And then when people in my day job found out about my writing, I've been very fortunate I haven't worked with the jerks or of people like snooty and looking down their nose.
Yeah.
Everyone has been like, that's amazing
Mhm.
that you do like this stuff and then you have this whole creative side over here. And they're like, because they're like engineers and policymakers and stuff, they're like, how do you make that work? And so then they're impressed, like, because I'm awesome. But
Exactly, right?
but I've in my day job, this year I've progressed to where I thought I wanted to be career wise, but with the um, extra responsibility and time that takes, I am now noticing day job creeping into and tapping some of the creativity and me not being able to focus on the writing as much.
Hmm.
And so now I'm at this crossroads of I like writing almost a little bit more than I love the day job stuff. Not quitting, still got to retire
Right.
and all that, but it is making me reevaluate the career trajectory I had professionally
Hmm.
is no longer what I want,
That is so
that I thought I
interesting.
wanted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because in middle age, as I'm right in the middle of myself, I have
Mhm.
noticed that people have had, I don't want to say, like they've had that internal conversation where I always wanted to work for, I don't know, pick your large company, or I always wanted this dream job, this dream company, this dream position. And getting it, they realize that either they like their individual contributor role better, or it's more, I don't want to say more responsibility they want, but it has changed the architecture of their lives in a way that they did
Mhm.
not anticipate. And
Yes.
yeah, and I don't know. It's just interesting because I feel like sometimes you just don't know until you do it what
Exactly.
what it'll be, what it will be. So, do you think then that you will? So, do you have a? So, and I was telling you this before we recorded that I know a number of people who are like cops or firefighters or some job that had like a 20 years and out. And so, if you started at 20, by 40 or 45, you were out. Military as well. And so then they did the full time writing while also having the pension and health insurance that one needs to because we live where we need to have like
Yeah, I
a
know.
backup plan. So so do you think that that's sort of the trajectory that you have where at some point then you can have, how can we say this, a safety net, and then also dedicate yourself to the creative full time?
Yeah, I think I may continue to evaluate how because I'm gonna keep working. Like the people who know that I write, like, when are you gonna retire and write full time? When are you gonna quit and write full time? And I'm like, I'm not making Harry Potter money
Right.
next year.
I know. Oh, Harry Potter
I'm
money.
not there.
It's like 50
I'm not
Shades
quitting.
money. There's so many.
Oh yeah, I'm not making 50 Shades money, right? I'm not that person. I'm just making enough money where I can go to a couple conferences and buy
Mhm.
me some tiaras, like chill. So it's like I'm going to continue to work, but I think what'll probably happen is that I may my day job focus may shift a little bit, um, and so that I can make it through to retirement. And I would when I retire, I don't even know if I retire from my day job if I will stop working.
And
I'm almost kind of that person who may still work somewhere else. Like I have this dream of being a full time writer, but I need a little bit of structure, and I don't know
And
if I
that's what
would
I was
have.
going to ask you because, so with the indie boom, a lot of people did quit their jobs to write full time, and not everybody could handle the shift. So
Yeah,
let me say this: well, I never really worked full time for a long time. The longest I worked full time was like a few years, and so I'm the wrong person, and I worked for myself. So then I can do what I want. So the shift for me wasn't hard, but I'm a fairly structured person. But I have found that people, I don't know if it's the structure or they felt like they had to be more prolific. Like it was very intimidating to go from whatever to full time creative.
yeah. I want to be like my dream of like let me retire, and then I want to write full time, and then I want to be that person's perfect part time admin assistant.
Right.
I just want to reserve the conference room and make sure everybody knows it's Joe's birthday and it's cake in the break room. Like I don't want like, I just want to be able to show up and like do my little thing and then leave. Like that's probably what all I would want. That's like my vision of I still would and I get it from my dad. He can't sit still either.
Mhm.
And my mom always tells me I can't sit still. So I think that I would still have to have something part time somewhere just for the structure of it. And then because it works for me now. Like if I have all day to write, I'm not gonna write. But if I know I need to write and be done by 2 o'clock because I have to after 2 o'clock I open my afternoons up,
Mhm.
I feel like I would still need that structure. Like, oh, I have to,
Oh,
have blocks of time for stuff.
that is so interesting. The secret I will tell you is that those of us who are home writing full time don't write full time either. I mean, honestly, like look, on days when I have to get my word count done because I have to be somewhere, it seems to be quite effective. But most days, I putter around. It takes me like 10 hours to write like 3 words. And in the meantime, laundry, I mean, like lots of stuff happens,
Yes.
Facebook, who knows? But
Yes.
um, there's no, I don't know if the human brain, I'm going to be honest. I mean, there's always going to be some outlier. You know, people who write 20,000 words, I don't know how they do it. One day I'll figure it
Yeah.
out. But I don't know if the human brain can sit down and do that sort of output. We're not machines. So I
Right.
think that that's the hard part. And what you do to fill the well on the other side or give the left brain the workout on the other side is the other thing. So I mean, different people do different things. I have other things I do to, like I'm like knitting, like, this pattern and I have to count and all this. So then I can freely have the other part of my brain work. But I do think that for most people, there's a balance. So whether or not that's paid employment or whatever it is, they do have something else to engage the other part of their brain so that when they sit down to do the creativity, they can.
Yeah, that I'm definitely gonna need the something else now. How involved it is, we shall see. But I do know that it'll be nice to make it to 50 and be able to have all the, like you said, the pension and all that jazz. But I probably still, and I also view it as I can go do whatever I want to do.
Right,
Like I can go be a barista at Starbucks if I want
right,
to. I can be whatever I want. And so that's kind of how I'm viewing it is I can write, but I can do whatever I want and have a whole new set of experiences that hopefully will help with my creativity
right.
even more. That's my romantic view of what that is going to look like.
May be true, but it may take some finessing to get it to be exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll ask you this last question that I often ask people. I mean, I'd ask everyone because who knows, I don't remember. But okay, like 25 plus whatever books in, do you have a sense of a certain theme or story that you're trying to tell, or something that's a common thread throughout your entire little your entire book catalog?
I was having those thoughts when I kind of started saying that I write sexy, messy, emotional romances,
Oh.
and I noticed a theme across a lot of my books is imperfect characters. I do not like perfect characters, and so I try from the very beginning to write stories that reflect what you may see in your coworker or your family or things like that. I want to explore emotions and relationships, and I want to explore the ones that are messy and not perfect and show that those people still deserve love or still can find a way despite all of the other weird crazy stuff that may be going on, or things that people may not agree with going on in a relationship. So I think that's one of my big things is that always wanted to write human black people, like regular old black folks who just like living their lives, and they may make mistakes and they may not have it all perfect and polished. Um, but they make it work. And so I think that's why I did push back with yes, he's a professional player and he's got two different kids' mothers because
Mhm.
he made mistakes when he was younger. But that doesn't take away from him still being a good father and being deserving of love. Or yes, her best friend um betrayed her for a selfish reason. But guess what? This is a real legit thing. I had this conversation with somebody. These are feelings. So if there's somebody else out there, one of my readers may have felt that or observed that. And they found a way to try to work through that.
Mhm.
So I think that's my theme is that, they're not going to be perfect because life isn't perfect. People aren't perfect.
No.
Um, but that still doesn't mean we aren't deserving of love and happiness.
I totally agree. You have no idea how I agree so much with that. So, with that, I want to say thank you so much for doing this interview. I'm so delighted to get to talk to you. I've been following your
Thank
career since
you.
the beginning. Um,
I feel the same. It's like since Crimson and when you emailed, I was like, yeah. It only took me so long to reply because of stupid day job. I didn't check my email for a while. So,
No worries. I may have emailed you before I traveled, and then I travel, and then I have jet lag, and then I'm like, oh, I haven't checked my email today. Let me get into it. My son makes fun of me because he was like,
And you're always traveling. Like, I need your life one day. Like, I want to be traveling.
that's what I do with my left brain. Like right now, I'm thinking about going to Iceland, and I'm like, but the logistics of getting there from Los Angeles is more complicated than apparently San Francisco or something else. So then I'm like, they're like, oh, we can book on 2 different airlines, and all I can think of is, but then I have to get my luggage and then roll it across somewhere else.
Right.
Exactly,
Oh,
right? I was just like, so. So this is like where my brain is now. Like, what are the logistics of doing this so that I don't lose my luggage or my sanity? Um,
right.
but no worries. Thank you so much, and I will follow you. And I'm going to go like download the women's fiction books right at this moment. Like this is apparently how my afternoon is going to be spent. I thank you in advance, and I just read the yesterday. I don't know. There's so much. I went biking and then I did something else. But then yesterday, I read the first of your Ghost Hunter series. I have a lot of thoughts
Awesome.
about good-looking men with dimples, but we'll just get back to that some other time. Um,
I, as do
I
I.
was,
But,
I was like,
and they're
like
loosely based off of the Ghost Brothers. So I was like, somebody got to write these dudes in a book. But anyway.
exactly. And I was like, but then I was like, oh, and a special edition. So that's how yesterday went. I was like, thank God the library has this amazingly thing for me instantaneously. I'm so thrilled.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you,
Thank
libraries.
you. But now I'm going to go download the other books. So anyway, so that's how my afternoon is going to go. I hope I know you're in a different time zone. Your evening includes writing, but I do want to thank you so much for this. And I want to say that I'm so delighted with your success and your writing. I love it when you're like find your books like in Target or whatever, Walmart or whatever. And I'm like, look at her. It's so exciting for me. It just makes me incredibly like proud and warm, fuzzy feelings. So
Oh, thank you.
I know I never comment because I'm not that person, but I'm like, I am so happy. I'm just sitting at home and look how happy I am. And then then I go about my day. So thank you for that. Continue doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for speaking with me and all of my listeners.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. If you ever want me to come back and just chat about whatever, always willing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
This has been A Time to Thrill with me, your host, Aime Austin. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you'll share, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It will help others to find and enjoy my conversations with brilliant women creators. Also, please hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. In addition to hosting this podcast, I am also the author of the Nicole Long series of legal thrillers. The first 3 books in the Nicole Long series are now live. You can download Outcry Witness, Major Crimes, and Without Consent to your e-reader right now. The 4th book in the new series, The Murders Began, is available for pre-order wherever you get your books. I am also the author of the Casey Quit series of legal thrillers. These titles are available wherever books are sold, your local library, and also an audiobook. You can also find this podcast on Facebook at A Time to Thrill. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you soon with more great conversations.